Can you imagine that the best iPhone to buy in 2025 is one that was released over 3 years ago? Sounds crazy, right? Well, get ready, because the iPhone 13 could be Apple's best-kept secret this year. Look, normally when we talk about phones from 3 years ago, we expect to find outdated devices that can barely handle modern apps. But the iPhone 13 is different. It's like that wine that just gets better with time. And there's a very specific reason why it's gaining so much popularity in 2025. Before we continue, let me tell you something interesting. A few weeks ago, a friend asked me which iPhone he should buy on a budget. When I mentioned the iPhone 13 to him, he looked at me as if I had suggested buying a Nokia 3310. But after 2 weeks of using it, he sent me a message that said it all. I can't believe this phone is from 2021. And there are 3 key factors that make the iPhone 13 a surprisingly attractive option. Active in 2025, its price has dropped to incredible levels, around $300. You keep getting the latest iOS updates. Its hardware is still more than capable for everyday use. But before you rush to buy it, you need to know exactly what to expect. Not everything is perfect, and there are some important details you should consider before making a decision. And speaking of the design of the iPhone 13, there's something fascinating that few people mention. It's one of the last iPhones with a feature that many users are desperately missing in 2025. The physical tray for the SIM card, yes, but let's take it step by step. The iPhone 13 maintains the industrial design that Apple has perfected. Flat aluminum edges, glass on both the front and back, and a build that simply screams premium all around. You know that feeling of holding something well made? That's exactly what this phone conveys, even in 2025. The interesting thing is that this design has aged extraordinarily well. In fact, if you put an iPhone 13 next to a base iPhone 16, most people would have trouble telling them apart at first glance. It's like those classic buildings that never go out of style. The design just works, but there are some details that give away its age. First, we have the traditional notch instead of the dynamic island. After using both, the traditional notch is harder to use. The notch has an advantage. It doesn't distract you using the phone. It's like having a traditional photo frame versus a digital one. Sometimes the simplest things are the most functional. The elephant in the room is, without a doubt, the Lightning port. In a USB-C dominated world in 2025, it's like having a car that runs on a different type of gasoline. It's not the end of the world, but it's something to consider. But hey, if you have a collection of Lightning accessories, this could be more of a plus than a downside. And here's something that not many people mention: the switch. The physical mute switch. The new iPhone 16 has replaced it with the action button, but there is something incredibly satisfying about the classic switch. It's like the switch. Traditional light versus smart light. Sometimes analog just works better. As for colors, the iPhone 13 came in a range that still looks fresh today. The matte finish of the aluminum frame has held up surprisingly well over time, and fingerprints are less visible than on the glossy finishes of newer models. One thing I love to mention is the durability. After 3 years on the market, we have seen that these phones are real tanks. The ceramic shield on the front and the reinforced glass on the back have proven their worth over time. Like those Swiss watches that get passed down from generation to generation. They're made to last. It's a phone from 2021. Take it slow. A friend of mine told me recently, spoiler alert, I couldn't be more wrong. The A15 Bionic chip in the iPhone 13. It's like that veteran athlete who keeps competing at the highest level, long after everyone expected them to retire. Let's be direct. In 2025, the A15 Bionic is still a beast. Did you know that this same chip was so good that Apple kept using it in the iPhone 14? That wasn't a coincidence. It's like having a Ferrari engine in a car that's 3 years old. It's still more powerful than many new models from the competition. But let's put aside the technical stuff and talk about real life. Social media. It opens them in a blink. Photo editing. A piece of cake. Gaming. This is where things get interesting. Modern games in 2025 run surprisingly well. Yeah. You'll notice some limitations in the more demanding titles, especially because of the 4 GB of RAM. But let's be honest, for 95% of users, this power is more than enough. It's like having a car that can go 200 km per hour when the speed limit is 120. You have more power, the one you really need. Now, let's talk about what they don't tell you. Other reviews. Multitasking is where you'll notice the age of the device. With 4 GB of RAM, you'll see that apps reload more often than on newer models. It's like having a smaller workbench. You can do everything, you just need to organize your space better. But here's where it gets interesting. The A15 runs iOS 18 with a surprising smoothness. The animations are smooth, the apps respond instantly, and the overall experience is good. It's Apple. The optimization between hardware and software is still exceptional. The only thing you'll really miss are the new AI features from Apple. It's like having an amazing car without cruise control. It's still a great vehicle, just without the latest extras. An important detail. In real-world tests, the speed difference for everyday tasks between the base iPhone 13 and the iPhone 16 is barely noticeable. We're talking about tenths of a second. It's like comparing 2 Olympic runners. Yeah, one is faster, but both are extraordinarily quick. But performance is just part of the story. Because what's the point of all this power if you can't appreciate it on a good display? And here, this is where we get to one of the most controversial points about the iPhone 13 from January 2025. 60Hz in 2025. Seriously. It's the first reaction of many. And yeah, I get the concern. In a world where even mid-range phones boast 90Hz or 120Hz, 60Hz can sound like a vinyl record in the streaming age. But here's an interesting plot twist. The optimization of iOS makes those 60Hz feel much smoother than you'd expect. It's like a chef who works wonders with basic ingredients. You don't need the most expensive stuff to get great results. Let's talk about what this display actually has. 6.1 inches of pure OLED, Super Retina XDR technology, brightness of 1200 nits for HDR, support for Dolby Vision, and you know what? The colors are spectacular. The blacks are so deep that when you watch content in a dark room, the edges of the phone practically disappear. It's like having a window to another world in your hands. Here comes something that few people mention. The color calibration is still exceptional in 2025. The photos look natural, the videos are vibrant without being over the top, and the color reproduction is so accurate that professionals can still rely on it to review their work. Now, let's be honest, will you notice the difference with 60Hz? It depends. If you're coming from a phone with 120Hz, yeah, you'll notice it in the first few days. It's like going from sneakers to classic shoes. Different, but not necessarily worse. But if you've never used a high refresh rate phone, you probably won't even notice. And here's something interesting. Even the base iPhone 16 still uses 60Hz. Apple clearly thinks that's enough for most users. One detail I love is the tone. True Tone. In 2025, it remains one of the best implementations of automatic color temperature adjustment. It's like having a personal assistant who constantly adjusts the lighting to make your eyes comfortable. But a big screen doesn't mean anything if you can't capture amazing moments to watch on it. And this is where the iPhone 13 camera has some interesting surprises. The iPhone 13's camera is like that seasoned photographer without the latest gear, captures moments well. It still has tricks, perfect, and in 2025, it still has some tricks up its sleeve. Manga that will surprise you. Let's start with the numbers. Dual 12MP camera. Yeah, it sounds modest compared to the 48MP of the iPhone 16, but here's where it gets interesting. Megapixels aren't everything. It's like comparing the size of a canvas to the quality of the paint. In daylight, the photos are still extraordinary. The colors are natural, the detail is sharp, and Smart HDR works wonders with the shadows and highlights. It's amazing how Apple managed to make a 2021 camera still produce images that have nothing to envy from many phones in 2025. But let's be honest. These are where the age shows in low-light conditions, and this is where the new sensors really shine. It's not that the iPhone 13 takes bad night photos. They are actually pretty good, but you need to work a little harder to get them. It's like driving at night. You get to the same destination, you just need to pay more attention. Now let's talk about something that many forget about, cinematic mode. This was the first iPhone to feature cinematic mode, and in 2025 it's still impressive if newer models have refined it. But the ability to add that cinematic effect to your videos remains an important differentiator. Video capabilities are another strong point. 4K at 60 FPS, HDR with Dolby Vision, optical stabilization, stereo recording. The stabilization deserves a special mention. The SIF sensor is still doing an exceptional job in 2025. It's like having a mini gimbal built in. Your videos look smooth even when you're recording while walking. A little discussed detail, the ultra-wide-angle camera. In 2025, it's still perfectly capable of capturing those moments where you need more perspective. And even though it doesn't have the advanced distortion correction of the new models, the photos are still more than shareable on social media. The 12MP front camera deserves its own applause. Selfies are still sharp. The portrait mode works surprisingly well, and for video calls, it's more than enough. It's like having a personal photographer, a person who always knows your best angle. Let's talk about something that worries everyone, the battery. And here comes a revelation that might surprise you. The iPhone 13 is still a champion of battery life in 2025. Although with a small asterisk, the 3,240 mAh battery may sound modest compared to the 2025 numbers. But Apple has always been the master of doing more with less. It's like having a hybrid car. You don't need a huge tank to go far. Let's take a look at real usage numbers. In 2025, web browsing, 15 hours. Video playback, 19 hours. Music streaming, up to 75 hours. But what does this mean in the real world? With typical use, social media, messaging, some photography, browsing, and music, the iPhone 13 still makes it to the end of the day. Yeah, the new models can offer 2 to 3 hours more. But let's be honest, when? Was this the last time you needed 48 hours of battery life? Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, degradation. If you're buying a used iPhone 13 or have had yours since 2021, the battery is probably at 80 to 85% of its original capacity. It's normal. It's like shoes that wear out with use. But here comes the good news. A battery replacement costs around $69 and gives the phone a new lease on life. Cost high. That's where you'll notice the age of the device. Wired charging 20W, wireless 15W, with MagSafe. 7.5W. MagSafe is still a brilliant feature in 2025. The accessory ecosystem is huge and perfect magnetic alignment makes wireless charging more reliable than ever. It's like having an invisible butler that always places your phone in the right position. An interesting detail, the Lightning port, although it could be seen as a disadvantage in 2025, has an unexpected benefit. All those Lightning accessories people have accumulated over the years are still supported. It's like having an adaptation, universal for all your old gear. But will it keep getting updates? That's the million-dollar question. And here comes the news that makes the iPhone 13 so special. In 2025, it not only gets updates, but it runs iOS 18 like a champ. But let's be real. There are some important differences between what you can and can't do on an iPhone 13 with iOS 18. It's like having a classic car with some modern upgrades. You have the best of both worlds, but with some nuances, which you do have. All the activities. Security updates, the new user interface, improved widgets, control center customization, the new iMessage features, but here comes the plot twist, the Apple Intelligence features. These are reserved for the A17, Pro and higher chips. It's like having Netflix, but without access to 4K content. You still get a great service, just without the more premium extras. The good thing, all the third-party apps like ChatGPT, Gemini and others work perfectly. I mean, you have access to AI, just not through Apple's native features, something that pleasantly surprises me. It's how well optimized iOS 18 is for the A15 Bionic. Animations are fluid, apps open quickly, and the overall experience is, well, Apple. You won't notice any lag or slowdowns in daily use. Let's talk about the future. Based on Apple's history, the iPhone 13 will likely get iOS 19 in January 2025 and iOS 20 in January 2026. Security updates until 2027. In 2025, the iPhone 13 is going for around $300 on the market. Yeah, you heard that right. $300 for a phone that's still competing with devices that cost 3 times as much. It's like finding a BMW from a few years ago at the price of a compact car. New. Let's do a quick comparison. iPhone 16, $829. iPhone 13, $300. Difference, $529. With that $529 difference, you could buy an Apple Watch. Get some AirPods Pro or just save a significant amount. But here's where it gets interesting, the real value. Think of it this way, for $300. You're getting a processor that's still more powerful than many mid-range phones in 2025. A camera that keeps taking exceptional photos. Premium build with glass and aluminum. Guaranteed software support for several more years. MagSafe and ecosystem of accessories. After reviewing every aspect of the iPhone 13, I concluded that might be controversial. This phone is like a good video game. Wine, it's not the newest on the shelf, but it's aged extraordinarily well. Let's see who this iPhone is perfect for. If you are someone who values value for money above all else, if you want a reliable iPhone that will keep getting updates, if you don't need the latest AI features from Apple, if you prefer to spend your money wisely. But let's be honest, it's not for you if you need a 120Hz display. It depends on USB-C. Do you want the latest AI features from Apple? You're into professional photography. Here comes my honest opinion. The iPhone 13 in January 2025 is probably the best purchase you can make if you're looking for a quality iPhone at a reasonable price. It's like finding a vintage Rolex at a bargain price. It may not be the latest model, but its quality is undeniable. Hello.